Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's been a while since I've decided to do a video. I did mention a little bit last night that I was going to attempt to do a drunk review on Sonic 2. There was a bit too many pauses in it. I was kind of in and out of focus. I got a little sidetracked at one point in time, so I ended up not posting it. But I did actually do want a genuine review on the film, being that, my God. In short, if you wanted to, you could end the video here. It's amazing. Go see it. The other part, being that I'm already going to get started, spoilers. I'm going to give away a few scenes here and there for the sake of context. I'm going to try my best to be as vague as possible, though, whenever I can, because I do strongly encourage anybody who, if any event, maybe haven't even seen the first one, please go out of your way to go check it out and then come back and watch this video. If not, by all means. Both films kind of, it's chronological. Like, you have to see the first one to understand as to why Sonic's here on Earth, or in the Green Zone, which is the town he lives in on Earth. But again, it's one of those things. Go watch the first one and then come back and watch this video where I'll talk about the second one. Now, I guess a good point would be to start with the first one, which I'm not going to go too deep into. I do remember when it was first announced and finding out that Jim Carrey would be casted as Dr. Robotnik, which I will talk about again at a later point. The man was absolutely born for the part. If you would have asked me 10 years ago that in a fan casting of Sonic the Hedgehog would Ace Ventura be a good Dr. Robotnik, I'd say maybe, only for the sake that the character is kind of goofy in the TV series of Sonic Boom, and like, yes, he's super intelligent but still makes very simple mistakes. Or if you want to go even back dated to the 1993 Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, where he's just a complete goof. So, but seeing it now, I mean, he just owns the character. But again, I'll get to that at a later point. The first Sonic, when I saw it, I actually took a date to go see the film. I remember, and I'm trying to play it off at the time, like, oh, I'm not all that invested in it. The only Sonic games that I ever played growing up was Sonic Heroes, and I want to say Sonic 2 at one point in time. I think my neighbor had a Sega Genesis at one point, and I did go over and play it. I also remember being incredibly too fast-paced for me. I was terrible at the game. But I got to a few Robotnik boss fights, because obviously you play him several times throughout the entirety of the game. But I digress. My point being is that I wasn't like oh my god, it's gonna be the greatest thing ever. It seemed like an interesting concept. Also, to find out, this was through my later research before the release of the second film. Our hero Sonic is actually voiced by Ben Schwartz, and if you know who that is, if you're a fan of Parks and Rec, he is the same guy who plays the character John Ralphio of the Ralphio twins. And there's actually a point in the second movie where he does a Ralphio impression, where he's doing something, or he's talking about Robotnik, and he's like, but he's the worst. And I fucking lost it. I was like, okay, I never thought this character would come back and show itself, especially in the form of Sonic doing that voice. But again, a little fun fact, Ben Schwartz, he voices Sonic. He does it really well, because Sonic is, especially once we later get introduced to Tails, Sonic is supposed to be like an adolescent. Like, he kind of comes off like this very teenager-esque energy, kind of like, very carefree, doesn't really want responsibilities. But towards the end of the film, of course, fighting with Robotnik, he kind of understands that with this power, he needs to utilize it for the greater, or for good. But all in all, I think when the movie came full circle, and like I said, now I'm going to start getting into spoiler territory. When he sends Dr. Robotnik into one of the other universes, that's when, you finally get to see the full bald Jim Carrey with the giant mustache. And not only just that, if the post-credit scene, which at this day and age, you would just assume that every film just has a post-credit scene, we get introduced that Tails would be in the sequel. That was actually a really good way to end it, because it ends well enough to know that, okay, well, Dr. Robotnik is stuck in a different dimension or a different universe. Obviously he's gonna have to find his way back. At first, in my head, I thought they may have been attempting to like write it off, like this film was gonna be just a one thing, but it did so well that, of course, it harbored a sequel. And of course, with the introduction of Tails, if the movie didn't do well, that would have been the worst way to end it, is to just be like, oh, well, Tails is going to be in the next one. But and even with that ending, I remember during this date that I went to, I was like almost to a point like, stop talking, you know, like Sonic's on right now. Like I actually found myself invested. There is a big human element in these films, which is just him interacting with you know, his human friends, or his basically adopted family by the second movie. It's kind of one of those things where it doesn't help you lose focus a little bit, because of course you're in this film to see Sonic at the end of the day. You want to see him doing things, you know, being fast, like doing the whole bit, fighting Dr. Robotnik, and Jim Carrey, like I said, owns the character, so like Jim Carrey's antics are hilarious, but there's times where they'll focus on the human characters and like their place in all this, and it does kind of draw it away a little bit. But James Marsden, who plays Tom, who basically more or less is like Sonic's like adopted, you know, dad, or he's his caretaker, he does a pretty good job, because he's just, you know, like he plays one of those characters where like, this is a lot for me. I'm just a small town sheriff in the city of Green Zone. Like I don't want anything to do with this. And like it's basically like the whole like buddy comedy trope, but he does it really well. It's kind of one of those things when you see his relationship start to develop with Sonic, where he starts actually caring for him as a person. It is kind of heartwarming. Like you kind of see like the development, because how he and his wife want to start a family, and this, and like, oh well, this is our family, but he does a really good job with it. But before I get too much, and like I said, this is not a review on the first film. This is about the second. So now that we've covered a bit of the first one, my next point I wanted to say is I'm actually going to talk about the trailer for Sonic 2 before we actually get into the film. Now, I do have one complaint about the trailer for Sonic 2. My complaint being was they could have left out the fact that Knuckles was going to be in the film. Now, it was really cool that they didn't mention it, because obviously that's going to fill seats a little bit more. But if you had already seen the first movie, you already are aware that the Echidna tribe exists. You are also very aware that Tails will be a part of it because of the post-credit scene. So when they revealed that Knuckles would be a part, now granted, the way they did it like had me actually lose my shit. Where, of course, it's, you know, Robotnik is fighting Sonic, and then Sonic says the line, something to the equivalent of, you know, like, you know, you're not going to be able to take my power. And then Knuckles stops him and he says, you think I need your power? Because he has trained his whole life for this very moment, which is like slowly explained over in the film. But Knuckles, again, like I said, I really wish they would have waited, because that would have been a huger, just, you know, as if I would have seen that throughout. Because in the second movie, they introduce him very, very early on. They try to, it goes from the perspective of Dr. Robotnik still stuck on the planet, and as he's trying to get his way out through one of the rings, as he finally was able to figure out how to make it work, Knuckles finally shows up. And like you just see his silhouette. They don't show him right away, but you know, if you're a fan, if you're watching the second film, I'm going to assume that you at least know of Sonic and his friends. So they show the silhouette of him, and I'm like, oh shit, like, again, it was like maybe the first 10 minutes of the film. So they didn't wait too long for that reveal. But it's one of those things where that was probably my only issue with the trailer. It was like, I probably could have waited, and it would have made probably a huger thing, like to be word of mouth or through social media to be like, oh my God, Knuckles is in the second movie, you know? But either way, that's probably my only thing that I could say in regards to the trailer. So getting back to the film itself, Sonic 2. Now, as I said from the start of this video, go see it. It is awesome. I'm going to try to kind of cover it from, like, you know, I'm going to be vague as possible. But like I said, disclaimer, there are going to be spoilers involved. And well, like at this point, you could stop the video, go watch the movie, and then watch the entirety of it if you want to just hear my take on it. But I will say Sonic 2, it pretty much picks up on the idea that, okay, now Sonic here lives in Green Zone. He still is on Earth. This is his new home. And he's just out there trying to do hero-esque things. There's a lot of jokes where he's basically claiming, like he's like spoofing Batman, basically. But it's kind of funny too, because of course it's a situation where he's like helping, but he's doing more damage. And which, when you look at it, like whether you watch any of the Dark Knight series, it's like how much in collateral damage actually happened for you to stop one man. But that's another whole like rant. But it's like, again, he kind of spoofs the idea, like he's out there just trying to do his best, being a vigilante. And of course, his owner Tom is kind of like, you know, you can't go out be doing this. Like, you're risking yourself more than anything if, you know, people find out, like, we've been told by the government to not talk about you, like you don't exist, that's why you're able to stay here. So it's one of those things where he starts doing like this kind of like adopted father role. Like, they're sitting there, they're fishing together, and he's like, look, this is for, you know, your greater good, you know. And he's like, you got to understand, when it's time to be responsible, you'll know when to step up. And then of course he's, you know, playing the like, what do you know, like, you know, he's like, you're supposed to be my friend, like, quit trying to be my dad. And which it's weird. I won't lie, that whole like image, and for some reason didn't like sit well with me. Like, it's a talking point at the very end of the movie where like Sonic calls he calls Tom dad, and I'm just like, that didn't feel as heartwarming as it was. Like, the fact that he said it out loud, it's kind of more of like, we get it, like these are your parents, you know, because they're taking care of you. But it's supposed to be like heartwarming. But it missed the mark with me on that. But everything else, like the connection between all the characters. So further into it, they actually introduced Tails pretty early on as well, even before his first interaction with Sonic. It does show that Tails has actually been tracking Sonic for quite some time, that he's just a huge fan of his. That's it. Like, he's just always wanted to meet him, and he actually goes to Earth to find Sonic to warn him that Dr. Robotnik and Knuckles are on their way to come get him. But it's one of those things that's it. Like, he's just trying to be the messenger, but he's also like a super fan of his. Now, the chemistry between these two characters is very, and this is why earlier when I was talking about Sonic, as a character, like, he's very much like kind of like this teenage, like, you know, this adolescence going on. Like, you know, you can't tell me what to do, I'll do what I want to do. Now, Tails comes across as this very like little brother mentality, and because there's like a lot of things like, oh my god, Sonic, you're so cool. Like, he just looks up to him so much. And of course they go into like telling like, oh, like they call you Tails because you have two tails. And he's like, he's embarrassed by it. He's like, well, yeah, you know, like, you know, back at, you know, home, like, people thought I was a freak because I had two tails, you know, but I've seen you go out and, you know, you do all these really cool stuff, you know, like, I feel like I can be like that one day, like, or I aspire to. There's actually one scene, again, it's super heartwarming, and like I said, the chemistry between these two characters, where he's like, yeah, pal, and he's like, did you mean that? And then he asks him something, he's like, yeah, but he kind of goes off on something else. He's like, no, did you mean that when you said I was your pal? He's like, I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you be? And he just kind of gets caught up in the moment, and like Tails just hugs Sonic real quick. And I remember I was like, "Dog, that was fucking adorable," because it's just one of those moments where it's like he can't help himself. He even like pulls away. He's like, "Sorry," and he's like, "No, it's okay, man. Like, it's cool, you know." He's like, "I just, you know, I've never really had a friend, you know." And so that it really kind of gets you invested in this whole thing, because by the time they meet up with Knuckles and Dr. Robotnik, that's when Knuckles kind of explains the whole Chaos Emerald concept and how they need to find it. That, and Sonic's like, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. And he's like, no, you have the map, you know where it's at. But by that point, it becomes the movie of, it's just a race to beat the bad guys to the thing, which we've seen, you know, a countless amount of times. But the way they do it is just like what's happening, the build up to it. Because there's actually a lot of scenes where they're doing stuff, and of course it shows like Dr. Robotnik and Knuckles. And I will say, so Knuckles is voiced by Idris Elba. He does a really good job with it. The thing that he really does well is that you have to understand this is Knuckles' first time on Earth, but he's completely foreign to it. But he's more like a foreigner at the DMV. Like he has absolutely no idea what he's doing. He has no concept of what's happening in our technology, which it's funny because like when Tails arrives, you know, he's like a super genius, so he has technology already, so he's able to like hack cars and stuff, like do this, that, and the other. And Knuckles is like, what is this? And like at one point, Dr. Robotnik is in his lab with Knuckles and his assistant, and he has a hologram of Knuckles there, or of Sonic, and they're staring at it. He's doing his little monologue, and then Knuckles just like crashes it, and he's like, "Tiny blue hedgehog destroyed. Let's go." Like as if that was like, "Oh, there's another one." Like he doesn't get that that's a hologram, and it's like, again, like I said, it's super funny because again, he just doesn't understand anything. Like he doesn't understand social cues or like things of that nature. Like at some point, Sonic explains to him what a fist bump is, and granted, like again, we get it. He's completely not from this world. I mean, but neither was Sonic. But he figured everything out a lot faster, I guess, because he was here for a while, I suppose. But Tails just kind of knew everything, like it's just. But again, like I said, I'm not gonna get into it too much. But his interaction with Dr. Nobot, that's what makes their interactions kind of priceless, because you have a super genius, and you have, because like in no means is Knuckles portrayed the way he was in Sonic Boom, where he's kind of just like a knucklehead, pun intended. He's just like doesn't understand why the things are the way they are. He's lived in his tribe his whole life. He was trained to go and get the Master Emerald back from Longclaw's tribe, which they do kind of explain a little bit, that like they don't focus on it too much. They give you enough to kind of gather as to why he's doing this. Is his tribe always believed that whoever holds the Master Emerald will be like basically their ultimate warrior, but Longclaw's tribe was like, no one person can have this, so we're gonna take it and put it into hiding. So he's like, I've trained this my whole life. My whole tribe has been wiped out by Longclaws. Like I am the only one. I have to basically go and make a name for myself at this point. So you look at him, and he's not really a villain for that reason. This is just, it's a birthright as far as he's concerned. Even like there's a scene where he's actually talking to his dad, and like he's getting ready to go fight, and his dad's like, "You're not ready yet. When the time comes, you'll know." And then his dad takes off to go into war with Longclaw's tribe, and his dad dies. Like he never sees his family after that again. So it's like super tragic, because it's like, like, no, I have to do this. Like I have nothing if I can't do this. So he's no longer seen as a villain in my eyes by that point. He's just, this is something he has to do for himself. So once they start, like, you start seeing, like, of course, Dr. Robotnik, being the sociopath that he is, he kind of, like, he makes it very obvious where you can kind of see where Knuckles is starting to understand that he's not a good guy. Where I think at one point they're about to leave, and then Knuckles is like, "What about your assistant?" He's like, "Forget him." And he's like, "Dishonor." He's like, "You gotta understand that in this world, these things just happen." Like, and it's like basically telling him, like, I will actually do this to you too at some point, because like, of course, Dr. Robot is just using Knuckles so he can get to the Master Emerald, because now he understands that there's power behind it. So we go further down, and this is also, I must say for the record, I did want to kind of talk about it throughout the entirety of this review, is the references in the film are pretty on spot. Like, again, the town green zone, that's obviously the first level that you ever play in the first Sonic. So there's a lot of jokes about chili dogs. It's even in the first one, and that's a very, very loose reference. It's actually a reference from the 1993 Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon show, where he was at the time voiced by Jell White. And if that rings a bell, yes, Urkel from Family Matters was voicing Sonic. Crazy, right? But in that one, there was an ongoing joke where that was his favorite snack, was chili dogs. So there's a constant reoccurring thing where he's either eating or hungry, and he eats the chili dogs. It becomes one of those things where that little reference, again, unless you had seen the TV series, it would go right over your head, and you're like, "Oh, that's kind of weird." Like like a hedgehog chili dog, like what? But no, it's there in sake of the reference. There's actually one point when Dr. Robotnik finally turns on Knuckles, and he gets a hold of the Chaos Emerald, and he becomes basically like just like Super Robotnik. They're basically fighting off all. They realize, because Knuckles gets trapped under a podium as the temple starts to flood that they're in. And of course, Sonic goes out of his way to save him. Little does Knuckles know, Sonic can't swim though. So there's actually another reference. It's a water level in one of the earlier games where, in order to stay submerged, you have to find these bubbles, and the bubbles are basically air. So at one point when Sonic is submerged, a bubble floats by his head. He looks at it, and he basically like sucks the air out of the air pocket, like making reference to the game and how you would gather air there. But it does a point where they're fighting after after Sonic saves Knuckles. Knuckles sees that he's there. He saves him. And of course, there's that conversation. He's like, "Why did you save me?" He's like, "That's why I saved you. Now we're even." He's like, "It's not how this works. I didn't do it because, I felt you were obligated to save me. It's just because we're trying to look out for you. I'm not your enemy." Then after that, they start fighting off the drones together, and they actually do like one of the super moves from like Sonic Heroes, like it's like a trio thing where like because you play as alternate characters, you just switch them out, and you're able to utilize all of them in one attack, and they actually do one of the attacks from the game. So when I saw that, I actually did nerd out because like I remember that. I remember doing that myself as a kid, but. It ends up altogether. I want to say it becomes just like a really good bro movie, and you, like stay with me here when I'm explaining this. Is so in the movie, the character Tom, he is going to, I believe it's his wife's sister's wedding. So when he's there, the groom basically tells him like, or he sees the groom with like his best men, and he's like, I wish Sonic had that. He's like, what, like, you know, buddies, a squad, you know. And of course it's just foreshadowing him, Knuckles and Tails all hanging out, being good friends. And that's kind of what it comes down to at the very end. Because I mean, it goes without saying, they defeat Robotnik. Actually, at one point, and this is going to go back to the references, is Sonic gets a hold of the Master Emerald. He defeats Robotnik, and when he has it, he becomes Gold Sonic, and which was just like a high, like it's like a higher form that he's able to accomplish in the game. So again, another reference there. It's funny because once he gets it, everyone's like, "Oh, it's Sonic," and then Knuckles like, "That's not Sonic anymore," because like the Chaos Emerald has corrupted him. Like no one can have that one power and still be the same person. And of course, he shows up and he's in gold form and he uses his like limitless power to like summon a chili dog. And then I think at one point he's like, if you've never had one of these, it's amazing. Look, Knuckles, you try one. And he makes like, he spawns one out of the air and he's like slaps him in the face like, never mind, he's still Sonic. And of course he basically like forges the emerald out of him. He's like, no, I can't have it. They split it up, they'll hide him. Now it's their job as a trio to defend, because again, not one person should have this power. But again, it's like, now we have to hang out all the time, but it's one of those things where you kind of see it where it's like, again, now they're all buddy and hanging out. They do a reference to the first film where Sonic is actually, he's playing in a baseball field, but he's playing by himself. Now this time, of course, his parents are there, and so is Knuckles and Tails. And it's funny because, like, you know, they're there trying to explain baseball to Knuckles. He's like, why would I run over there just to come back at the same destination? Like, just hit the ball. Like, again, he just sells it like where it's like, I don't understand it. All I know how to do is fight and honor. You know, it's like, which again, it makes it super hilarious. I mean, boiling it down altogether, I think it was, you know, it's a kid's film. It doesn't try to do anything, you know, revolutionary with film. It's not too over the top. It's just the right amount of dumb. Like I would say with the second one, there's a huger focus on the human element. There's actually like a 10-15 minute interval where they don't really mention Sonic or Knuckles, Tails, or Robotnik. It's all about, you know, Tom's wife's like sister's wedding and like the drama that's happening there. And I'm not gonna lie, for a minute I was like, I was actually invested because it was funny, but I'm like, wait a minute, where's Sonic? Like, I'm like, well, why are we so focused on this? So it did that again, but that's not even a huge complaint, honestly, because like I said, it was funny. It just seemed a little drawn out more than it was the first time. But I mean, all in all, I will say that the movie did really well. I think so far it has grossed 145 million domestically and 287 million worldwide. So yes, this is the new video game adaptation film that needs to be followed up after. So granted, once again, warning, spoilers, but the post-credit scene, which if you haven't seen or read in different articles anywhere else, they will be introducing Shadow the Hedgehog in the next film. Basically what it ends up being is they're trying to find Dr. Robotnik's corpse, because they're not sure where he is, so they're checking the wreckage. They can't find him. It has been confirmed, though, that Jim Carrey has decided to retire after this role. I don't know if that means he's gonna like finish the films and then that's it, or if that's the way it ends, is like he's gone. He's no longer a character. Like he is dead. Because they don't really confirm as to whether he is or isn't. But they said like, hey, we were like looking through his lab and we found something deep rooted in his coding about like some project he's been working on or this, that, and the other. And that's when you find out about Shadow. And of course they just show like somewhere out, like very deep in this lab, you just see this chamber kind of come up from the ground. And of course inside that chamber is like Shadow the Hedgehog. I do believe, from what I've read, is that Keanu Reeves is supposed to be voicing Shadow, but I mean, who's to say? I will say I am glad that this movie is doing so well. I guess I wouldn't say as comparative nature to things like the old Resident Evil series, because I don't really think the old Resident Evil series really did bad. I think it was like a preference thing where when you see the old Resident Evil series, it's like it's based in the universe, but it's not canonical. Like it seemed more like an action film at some point in time, but in all fairness, that's ultimately what a lot of these newer Resident Evil games have kind of become. Like even the remakes have seemed more just like action games. I will say like the Villager, those are amazing. Those are still really true to like the original essence of what Resident Evil was. But like I said, I do like what Sonic 1 and 2 was able to do as far as bringing in money and show that there still can be good, video game adaptations of films or vice versa. Because it gives it more promise that these aren't just a wasted investment. Because, of course, as we've seen in the past, there has been films that just missed the mark. Me, I've been working on trying to get a video together and more structured like this one about Silent Hill and its film. It misses the mark with a lot of people, but as a film, it's not terrible. But this one just does really well. I do think that's also because it's from the perspective that this is a children's film. So again, when you have an IP like Sonic, like there is lore and there is like characters that you have to try to follow to be true to it, but you still have a little bit of freedom. Like I'm super curious to see how the new Mario film is going to come out with Chris. I believe Chris Pratt's going to be voicing Mario for reasons I don't understand. But it's one of those things where I'm like, again, you have a lore and you have context but you don't, you could do what you want. Like by all means have artistic liberty. I always believe in that. Like I don't want to watch something that just looks like a direct like screen grab of like the game. And like I will make a one more talking point about the Resident Evil remake that came out just this past November, I believe. That one wasn't absolutely terrible. It's actually really cool, like the little things that they would show and like the little references to the game. And they change up enough where it is its own take. Like essentially, if I remember correctly, it's supposed to be part one and part two, the events of those games happening at the same time in the movie. So, with that being said, though, there's points where there's references, but again, like if you've played either one of those games, you're like, this is just exactly that. And it almost to a point where it felt like a fault. So now, granted, I think that movie came out on Thanksgiving or something. I just don't remember if the turnout was really good. I think we went like 2 days after it dropped, and there was like maybe a handful of people in the theater. But granted, like with the IP like Resident Evil that has gotten so many adaptations, whether it be film or even its a cinematic universe, I mean, another one is just a drop in a bucket. What more can you talk about this? So I'm not going to say that's probably why it performed badly or anything. But again, with what Sonic 2 was able to do, and also with Sonic 1, is I want, hopefully, like more people are going to be willing to make that investment to make more of these movie adaptations of video games. Especially like some of the older classic ones, because Resident Evil, although is an older series, it's not that old. So I mean, granted, we're already getting the Mario Brothers film, we already got our Sonic film, so I mean, at this point, sky's the limit. I still will never forgive, I think it was IGN, they did a April Fool's prank by making a theatrical trailer for a Legend of Zelda movie. And it, like, if you haven't seen it, just look up Legend of Zelda trailer, and it looks really good. Like I think the opening scene, it shows Link, and that's when he finds the Triforce, and like his caretaker's like, and do me a favor, just don't touch anything. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I see this spin, I see it take like this nice little adventure movie, maybe like some Lord of the Rings-esque thing going on, and it was an April Fool's joke. But again, at this point, it could definitely be a possibility because obviously there's money to be made here. But thank you guys for watching. I haven't done, like I said, one of these in a long time. I do plan to get some more content out. It's not even going to be so much like just a review. I'm not just going to focus on, like, I do want to do like the food thing again, because give me an excuse to eat. But I mean, granted, I don't want to just do the one thing. So that's why I decided to do this editorial on Sonic 2. Granted, Like, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. If there's a movie that you think that I need to watch. Granted, I don't want to just keep it to newer films. I also do want to talk about older films as well. Granted, it's one of those things, like I've watched a lot of obscure films, but there's also a lot of big ones that I haven't seen. So granted, like I said, if you want to hear me spiel about it, if you want me to hear me rant about it, let me know. Put it in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, all that nice stuff. And I will see y'all guys next time. Take care.